which is to deliver quality technical vocational education and training through innovation, collaboration, and evidence-based practice. Central to this mission is the strengthening and sustainable research culture that informs policy, enhances program delivery, and supports workforce development aligned with national and global labor market demands. We will be setting out today, colleagues, to achieve a few objectives. And chief among them is to inspire greater participation in research, foster cross-divisional collaboration, and promote research-led improvements in training delivery, skills development, and industry partnership. This session will also assist us in showcasing the work of our colleagues who have diligently done research, who have consistently delivered insights that can help us to advance the mission of the Trust, and who have graciously consented to share some of those insights with us today as we provide an opportunity for the sensitization around the research and development in TVET. And we will have 4 presentations as we go through this session. But just to do the official opening and welcome before we get to our presenters, it is indeed my pleasure to invite Dr. Nicole Berry, Director Principal in Region 1, to officially welcome you and open our sensitization session.
Master of Ceremonies, Mrs. Julia Smiley Green, Director, Marketing and Communications, Dr. Marcia Roa Monde, Senior Director, Heart NSTA Trust, Dr. Steve Lawrence, Director Principal, Region 5, Dr. Monica Porter Lewis, Senior Manager, Heart NSTA Trust, Mrs. Carolyn Sang Downer, Strategic Market Research Specialist, Heart NSTA Trust. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this research and development sensitization session and to thank you for joining us this morning, whether here in the corporate boardroom or through our live stream. Your participation reflects a shared commitment to strengthening how we think, plan, and act as a learning organization. Research and development is not optional in technical and vocational education and training. It is foundational. In a rapidly evolving labor market, TVET systems must be agile, responsive, and forward-looking. This can only be achieved through deliberate inquiry, systematic evidence generation, and innovation. Research enables us to anticipate skills demand, improve training quality, modernize curricula, strengthen industry partnerships, and ensure that our interventions remain relevant, inclusive, and impactful. Without a strong research and development function, TVET risks becoming reactive rather than strategic. This sensitization session forms part of the Heart NSTA Trust's ongoing commitment to institutionalizing a robust research culture across the organization. This session is designed to highlight completed high-impact research led by Trust personnel, particularly in the areas of TVET, training delivery, workforce development, labor market trends, and related thematic areas, while encouraging staff and trainees to see research as a practical tool for problem solving, innovation, and continuous improvement. The objectives of today's engagement are to showcase Heart NSTA Trust-led research, strengthen research participation across divisions, inspire staff and trainees to actively engage in inquiry and evidence-informed decision-making, and provide a structured platform for dialogue among researchers, practitioners, and stakeholders. Ultimately, our aim is to ensure that research directly informs improvements in training, delivery, skills development, and industry alignment. I'm especially pleased to feature presentations from the National Training and Programs Divisions and the Research and Development Department. Their work reflects the depth, rigor, and relevance of research being conducted within the Trust, including doctoral led research that speaks directly to national and regional TVET priorities. I also look forward to the ensuing discussions, allowing for meaningful exchange and reflection on how these findings can be translated into practice. As you engage today, I encourage you to view research not as a separate or academic exercise, but as a core element of your professional practice. A strong, future ready TVET system depends on our collective ability to generate evidence, learn from it, and apply it strategically. I commend the research and development team for organizing this important session and for their continued leadership in advancing the Trust's research agenda. I wish us all a productive and insightful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berry. I'm sure you are a little more aware, colleagues, of why we're here, and the anticipation levels may have gone up a bit because Nicole has now whet your appetite of things to come. And I am excited about the findings that will be shared, and I'm hoping that you are equally excited as we present these insights for you, and hopefully these are things that you can take outcomes from that will help to advance the work that we do at the Trust. Our first presenter this morning is Dr. Marcia Roamonde, Senior Director for Standards Curriculum and Learning Resources. And Dr. Monde is a strong believer in the power of education and training to transform lives. She's a trained teacher, instructional designer, and curriculum developer. She holds a Bachelor of Arts, a Master of Science, and a Doctor of Philosophy that focuses on the effective design of TVET programs for training and workforce development. Additionally, she has done various short courses, the most recent being Fundamentals of Cybersecurity and Artificial Intelligence. Dr. Amande has taught at further education colleges in the UK and was also principal of the VTDI. Her passion lies in curriculum design, competency-based education, strengthening quality in teaching and learning, and effective leadership and instructor training and upgrading. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome Dr. Marcia Roamonde as she presents on why research matters in TVET, informing policy, practice, and outcomes. Dr. Amonde.
Good morning, Mrs. Smiley Green. Good morning to my fellow presenters. I thank you, Miss Nicole. You have set the stage very well for the issues that will be coming out in my discussion. I had a presentation and when I looked at it last night, it would last for about 40 minutes. But I noticed Satana only gave me 10 minutes. So I had the not too easy task of reducing a 40 minutes presentation into 10 minutes. So I will try to stick to the 10 minutes. A few years ago, I got an email from UNESCO. It came through the Ministry of Education, and the email asked for information about TVET and its link with social and economic development in Jamaica. It asked for enablers to TVET. It asked for barriers to public and private sector involvement. And then it specifically asked about research. It asked, how is evidence-based research being used to overcome barriers and improve policy and investment opportunities in Jamaica? If it is not done, how can it be done in Jamaica? It further went on to ask, is research being used to advise resource allocation, training, investment decisions, individual decisions relating to stakeholders? And is it being used to advise national workforce development goals? We were not able to provide much because there's a dearth of information around these issues in Jamaica. It is important to look at TVET research within the context of TVET. TVET has gained increasing importance. It is considered the driving force for sustainable development. According to UNESCO, it has raced to the top of the agenda. Its significance is continuously rising in governmental, social, and economic development objectives. As Professors Morris and Hutton says, there's a greater acceptance and recognition of TVET in the past decade, in the Caribbean, including Jamaica. As reflected in the Shanghai Consensus, that's where they went to Shanghai and crafted a new vision for TVET. TVET systems need sustained transformation and revitalization if TVET is to realize its enormous potential. In a rapidly changing world shaped by automation, climate change, digital transformation, and shifting labor markets, TVET cannot operate on tradition alone. It must operate on evidence, and Dr. Nicole said it. And that evidence comes from research. Part of the reform of TVET includes the need to focus on research, deep, scholarly, interrogative research, including research relating to return on investment. Research allows for evidence-based policymaking. It's data to justify public spending. It provides for evidence-based policy, and it allows policymakers and practitioners to move beyond guesswork and implement strategies proven to reduce dropouts and increase certification rates. Research helps to track Industry 4.0 trends to ensure that AI, automation, and greening, and very importantly to us at this time, employability skills are being integrated in the curriculum, and that it is competency-based. Without data-driven research, there will be skills mismatch, where graduates remain unemployed while industries face labor shortages. Research identifies exactly what micro-credentials or job qualifications we will need and the ones that are in high demand. Research provides accessibility. It allows for inclusivity in that it develops best practices for integrating students with disabilities or those considered to be at risk. The findings from research can be implemented to strengthen innovation in training and delivery. It tests the effectiveness of our virtual reality simulators, gamified learning, and it tests the effectiveness of the flexible blended approach to learning, a focus that we will be having as an organization next week, being led by ETMU, Ms. Keisha McKenzie, Ms. Natasha, and her team. Research, therefore, improves pedagogical quality, right? Dr. Porter Lewis, we are concerned about the the curriculum and the instructional resources and the quality experience that is giving to our trainees in the institutions. When our instructors engage in research, they become reflective practitioners. This is a term I learned in Teachers College. It has been around for quite some time. They move from covering content to improving their competencies as instructors, as facilitators of learning. Research helps to answer critical questions. Are our graduates ready, job ready? Are our programs inclusive? Are we responding to the needs of the industry? Is the curriculum being effectively delivered? Are we equipping learners with the technical skills, the metacognitive skills, and the employability skills? Are we preparing them, Mrs. Birch, Mrs. Sangdowner, with information about the emerging jobs and what is coming in the emerging industries? In other words, without research, we react. With research, we anticipate. HeartTrust, as a national training agency, has been positioned to drive TVET in Jamaica. And I will be bold enough to say, and in the region, the Act gives us this power. We are therefore positioned to drive the agenda for TVET. And hence, we have to improve, we have to influence policy, practice, and outcomes across the TVET system. To do this, we have to be involved in research. On the international stage, it says the global state of TVET research in 2024 and 2025 is characterized by a significant surge in scholarly output, primarily driven by the twin transitions, and we hear about this a lot now, of digitalization and green economies. But what about Jamaica and the region? What is our status? A systematic literature review was published in 2023 in an article in a journal by Barrington Graham from the University of the West Indies on the state of TVET research in Jamaica and the Caribbean. He looked across the various international databases and online libraries, including UTech and the University of the West Indies. He found 45 TVET research papers that he said was published between 1996 and 2021. Only 42% were journal articles, 29% were reports, 16% were theses or dissertations, 7% were books, and others were policy papers, conceptual papers, conference proceedings. Trinidad had 29% of these, Jamaica had 9%, and Barbados had 4%. He concluded that the pace of TVET research in the Caribbean is declining in the past few years. He further said that the time and the resources to collect solid primary data for research is sparse. Although Jamaica is the largest country in the English-speaking Caribbean, it's one that is a model for TVET and TVET practices. It is a leading country. It was not the leading country from which the research papers emanated. If we say we are leading TVET in the region, then we really need to produce more research that will inform policy, practice, and outcomes. TVET research is also a focus for the UNESCO UNIVOC medium strategy for TVET. The strategy emphasized strengthening the link between TVET research and evidence-based policymaking to address global challenges and support the transformation of TVET systems. I am aware of our own research done by LMRID in the various areas. I'm sure you will be telling us more about that, Mrs. Sangdowner. I'm aware also of the research that we do in the monitoring and evaluation department. It is a department that's close to my heart because I was involved in the establishment and the inception of this department. I think it has a big role. We now need to use the research that emanates from LMRID, from the monitoring and evaluation department, to really inform our policies and practice. Given our triple access strategy, there is an opportunity for us to do research in quality and certification, youth at risk and inclusion, and just the entire TVET ecosystem. There's also an opportunity for an area known as applied research. We have the opportunity as TVET workforce colleges and institutes to strengthen applied research. This is a methodology used to find practical solutions for specific real-world problems. It is driven by a goal that says, how can we fix this? How can we make this better? It should be problem-focused. It should have practical application, and it is also time-bound. It is very prevalent in the Canadian TVET colleges, this idea of applied research. And I know that Ms. Campbell and her team in the strategic partnerships department have started some applied research. I really think that we really need to mobilize this, up the momentum, and do more of this. Ebony Park is a rich ground for that in terms of the various systems around agriculture. Strong quality research has to be anchored in gaps in the literature or practice, quality data collection, sturdy methodology and methods, ethical practices, incisive analysis, and recommendations that can really be applied. Last year, in the latter part of last year, I published an article in a research journal. It was on TVET leadership, and it was published in the Caribbean Journal of Education and Development. I found it a rigorous process, I'm telling you, because I've not been involved in research all these years. When I submitted the first draft, the feedback I got was revise and resubmit. I was just so happy it was not rejected. But when I looked at the feedback, I'm not telling any lie, I had to put it aside for about 2 weeks and before I was able to go back to it. As researchers, those of us and those who have become, they will tell you that this is all a part of the experience. It's very rigorous, but it really develops you and give you some solid metacognitive, help you to know the area, and it humbles you because it shows you how little you know. The challenge for us as an organization is not whether research is important, is whether research is embedded in our systems. A simple thing like getting time away from all the distraction of emails and a quiet time is necessary for us to do quality research. We should be able to say to our supervisors, give me 2 or 3, or even a week, or even 2 weeks. I can't come in. I need to go and focus on this research paper. We need to develop partnerships with universities. There was once the idea put forward that we need to have a chair. Hart needs to pay for a chair at the University of the West Indies, who is helping to look at systems and processes and do research on some of our main areas so that we can have solid, reliable recommendations for improvement. Coming down now, colleagues, this week we celebrate National Career Awareness Week. As colleagues, many of us are in the jobs for years. I am going to say this is one way we can excite and renew ourselves by developing skills and competencies in research. This is one way we can look back at our careers. We are doing a lot of things well, a lot of things as an organization. We don't know how well we are doing those things. And we can know this through research. Research must be integrated in the way we develop our standards, in our curriculum development and review cycles, in our institutional planning, in our training delivery, in our certification, in our quality assurance process. We need to conduct a return on investment research. Let us commit to asking better questions, and let us be comfortable colleagues with some of the questions. Let us commit to collecting better data. Let us commit to using evidence courageously, even when it challenges our assumptions. Because when research informs policy, and policy guides practice, and practice improves outcomes, TVET fulfills its true mandate. It transforms lives and it transforms economies. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Monday. Don't go too far away, just in case we have questions for you. Colleagues, did you find that very riveting and inspiring? Thank you so much for that word, Dr. Lawrence. I felt like I was in a classroom and I was just soaking up all of this very rich information that Dr. Monday was imparting on us. And I do hope that all of us would have found the experience as enlightening as that. If you have questions, colleagues, we encourage you to post your questions in the chat. We do have persons monitoring the chat and will make those questions available. If there are insights that Dr. Monday would have raised that you found particularly interesting, you may also go ahead and post those in the chat and share with us. I got some good takeaways, Dr. Monday. When you spoke about research allowing us to go beyond the guesswork and move into strategies. And I found that to be quite riveting as well. You spoke about how data-driven research helps to eliminate skills mismatch. And in the industry that we are in, we definitely have to ensure that we are taking care of that particular area. You also spoke about how applied research helps us to commit to asking better questions, and how using evidence courageously, even when it disrupts the status quo, is also a very important outcome of the applied research. And then the final takeaway that I found quite riveting that I just want to reinforce is when you said, without research, we react, but with research, we anticipate. And I got some amens from Carolyn and Allison from our research department, because they were also there saying that, you know, this approach that you spoke about, Dr. Monday, of taking time away from the work to do the research is what they actually practice. So this reinforces for us, colleagues, that we are doing something right. And we are doing something that is in service to our nation, that is helping us to fulfill our mandate, and it is not something that we should take lightly as a trust. We will move to our second presenter. However, if you have questions for Dr. Monday, there will still be an opportunity for you to share those, and we will have her address them at an appropriate time later in the proceedings. Our second presenter is Mrs. Carolyn Sang Downer, Strategic Market Research Specialist, who will be presenting on the topic, Determining Organizational and Ecological Contributors to Termination Among NEET Youth. Now, Carolyn is a research specialist with extensive experience in research and evaluation across the technical and vocational education training system. Her work focuses on translating complex data into actionable insights for decision makers. She has coordinated large-scale data collection exercises and facilitates stakeholder validation and policy dialogue to align training programs with emerging workforce needs. Mrs. Sang Downer, my apologies, holds a Master of Science in Marketing, a postgraduate certificate in Business Administration, a Bachelor of Science in Physical Planning and Environmental Resource Development, and she has also completed international certification in monitoring and evaluation. Colleagues, please join me in welcoming Mrs. Caroline Sang Downer, our second presenter.
Thank you so much for that welcome, and good morning, colleagues, and those who are online, good morning. Dr. Amonde, thank you so much for reinforcing the importance of research. And I'm going to restate that a statement that you made, and Mrs. Smiley Green had also mentioned it, that without research, we react. With research, we anticipate. And that is why I am here today to present evidence-based research to inform decisions in the TVET ecosystem. Did you know that terminations for the financial year 2023-2024 among participants who were tagged as NEET youth, that is, youth not in education, employment, or training at the time of application, they accounted for 5,181 or 24% of HEART's overall terminations. That means 1 in every 4 trainees who left our programs came from a group specifically targeted for inclusion and workforce integration. The immediate assumption might be that beneficiaries leave because the training environment was not meeting their needs. But is that actually the case? Were these beneficiaries leaving because of weaknesses in their training environment, or because life conditions were interrupting their ability to persist? The study, titled Determining Organizational and Ecological Conditions to Termination Among NEET Youth in the Heart NSTA Trust Training Programs, sought to understand why these trainees terminated their training programs. We wanted to know whether their termination was linked to service delivery quality or to circumstances outside the training environment. So our investigation was guided by a research framework drawn from literature that explained NEET youth termination through 2 interacting perspectives. One perspective, organizational, explains termination as a satisfaction response to experiences within the training environment. The training environment here includes heart-owned institutions, community training interventions, and work-based learning programs. The other perspective, ecological, states that satisfaction alone does not fully explain persistence because challenges of broader social, economic, and personal pressure exist out beyond the training environment and play a role in shaping trainee program termination. So it views termination as a consequence of life's external conditions. Now, each perspective was examined using measurable indicators to determine which showed the stronger association with termination risk. Indicators measuring NEET youth experiences within their training environment includes training delivery and learning resources, administrative support, career counseling. Indicators measuring the trainee's external life condition includes financial, psychosocial, family, and personal obligations. Based on the framework, let's now take a closer look at the questions guiding our investigation of our target group. The assessment for our question was in two parts, and these were related to the NEET youth experiences in their training environment. So for each organizational indicator, we first measured satisfaction against HEART's trainee 85% satisfaction target. And this target was a target that was published in the HEART Corporate Plan 2023-2024. Now, if the trainee satisfaction rate for an indicator fell below 85%, we treated it as a service concern. Next, we then measured the termination risk for those indicators with a service concern using HEART's termination risk appetite of 20%. Therefore, if terminations aligned to these indicators exceeded the 20%, this was treated as a retention risk. Now for question 2, indicators measuring terminations associated with the trainee's external life conditions were benchmarked against HEART's 20% termination risk appetite to determine the high-risk indicators that contributed to the NEET trainee's termination. The evidence for our investigation used a mixed method approach. We used an online questionnaire which was administered via telephone interviews to the target beneficiaries across all 14 parishes of Jamaica during May 13 to June 27, 2025. We made contact with 889 beneficiaries, some of whom were not eligible to participate. So overall, 342 eligible individuals participated. We also conducted depth interviews and focus group discussions with the target group to gain qualitative insights, and also had consultation with internal staff. Now let's step back in time and view the profile of the respondents during training in 2023-2024. Most of the respondents were young women. 78% were adolescents aged 17 to 24. 63% terminated the program before completing half of the prescribed duration. 53% lived in rural communities, while 43% in urban communities. Having established the context of the study, I now present the findings from the analysis for the organizational dimension of the study, looking at satisfaction with the training environment and associated terminations. We found that the NEET beneficiaries viewed training delivery and learning resources positively, with satisfaction levels exceeding the 85% trainee satisfaction target. Although each measured indicator accounted for a small share of terminations, they were not considered significant because they were well below the 20% risk appetite. Even in areas where service gaps were noted, such as instructor delivery among urban beneficiaries, this did not translate into meaningful terminations. This therefore indicates that training delivery and learning resources were not significant drivers of NEET youth termination. Beneficiaries were generally satisfied with administrative support. They felt staff were responsive and helpful within the learning environment. Even among trainees who reported lower satisfaction in the measured indicators, this did not translate into meaningful terminations. So the assessment process showed slightly weaker perceptions, particularly around clarity and fairness of the assessment process, although work-based learners reported more positive experiences. For all measured indicators, termination levels remained within the 20% risk appetite threshold, indicating that service gaps in administrative support, these were not a significant driver of termination among NEET beneficiaries. Beneficiaries' satisfaction with career counseling and employment clarity exceeded 85%. Trainees' termination associated were minimal, ranging from 0 to 3%. So although respondents in the older age group, 25 to 34 age group, reported satisfaction below the 85% benchmark, this did not translate into a significant number of termination within the subgroup. Career counseling and employment clarity were generally rated positively, and only a small share of terminations were linked to the measured indicators. Therefore, service gaps in career counseling and employment clarity were not significant drivers of trainee termination. Under career match and program alignment, one measured indicator, that is alignment of program content with career interests, fell 6 percentage points below the 85% trainee satisfaction benchmark. This shortfall was evident across all subgroups, except for respondents aged 25 to 34. While this is the only indicator so far that had the highest attributable termination of 11%, it remained a low to moderate risk even among the subgroups. Therefore, service gaps in career match and program alignment were not significant drivers of trainee termination. Based on the assessment of the three broad organizational indicators, we are now able to answer question 1. I wonder if you can answer that question. You would have observed that no organizational indicators simultaneously fell below the 85% trainee satisfaction target and was linked to termination levels exceeding the 20% termination risk appetite. Therefore, we can accept that the NEET youth training environment was not a significant contributor to their decision to terminate their training program. Since the primary drivers of NEET youth terminations were not located within the training environment, the analysis next examined factors relating to their external life conditions. Firstly, the financial indicators. 31% of trainees terminated their training programs due to ongoing financial pressure, which made it harder for them to concentrate. All subgroups were affected by financial instability, pushing terminations above the 20% risk appetite. Similarly, 26% of the trainees who terminated reported that they were unable to afford transportation to attend classes, and this also exceeded the 20% termination risk appetite. You know, one respondent from a rural community shared that he had to choose whether to use the limited funds he had to earn or to learn. Psychosocial indicators measured the trainees' mental and emotional preparedness to remain engaged during training. One of the 5 measurable indicators, that is low motivation, contributed to 24% of trainees' termination, pushing terminations above the 20% risk appetite. Although the remaining 4 indicators did not show overall average terminations above the 20% risk threshold, elevated risk emerged within specific subgroups. In particular, CTI trainees recorded the highest subgroup level terminations of 27%, and this was linked to inadequate emotional well-being, which affected regular attendance to training. These high-risk patterns signal that motivational decline, lack of emotional stability and wellness, and inability to manage stress were critical drivers of NEET youth termination. For many participants, training attendance was not only about motivation or interest. The family and personal obligation indicators captured how caregiving duties, household responsibilities, and levels of family support influence NEET youth ability to attend training and complete their program. Now, although the average termination for each indicator was below the 20% termination risk appetite, a closer look within the subgroups, and this is important, you know, when we disaggregated the data, because the average is showing low, that determination was not a risk factor. But when we disaggregated the data, this is where we found the pockets. So when we looked at the different subgroups, as you can see, 24% of CTI trainees terminated due to family responsibilities interrupting their attendance routine. 23% of work-based learning trainees also terminated as they did not have reliable arrangements for the care of their children or dependents during training hours. So, family and personal obligation challenges were not systemic drivers of termination, but were significant among trainees in the CTI and work-based learning modalities. Peer support refers to the encouragement, guidance, and practical help trainees received from fellow participants and the extent to which they felt accepted, connected, and a sense of belonging within the training environment. When we viewed the findings for these measurable indicators, the results were reassuring. Most trainees did not leave because they felt isolated, excluded, or disconnected from others in the training environment. Termination linked to these indicators remained below the risk threshold. So based on the assessment and findings of the ecological indicators, we are now able to answer question 2. And again, can you answer question 2? Our findings for the ecological indicators reveal that financial instability and psychosocial stressors were the strongest contributors to NEET youth terminations. Financial instability contributed to the termination of a share of 31% of respondents, high risk. Difficulty affording transportation costs to attend training accounted for terminations among 26% of respondents, high risk. Lack of motivated contributed to 24% of respondents terminations, high risk. Now, subgroup analysis within the psychosocial indicators revealed pockets where terminations exceeded the 20% risk appetite due to a lack of emotional wellness and the ability to manage stress. This was prevalent among females, trainees aged 17 to 24, rural participants, and those in community training interventions and work-based learning modalities. Family and personal obligation indicators. The subgroup analysis also revealed pockets among those in community training interventions and work-based learning modalities. Now, our study's target group came to us as youth not in education, employment, or training. In other words, NEET youth. Most terminated because they struggled to keep pace with the pressures of daily living. As part of this study, we examined the participant status at the time of the survey, specifically whether they remained outside education, employment, or training, were they still NEET. The analysis showed notable differences across subgroups. Gender, 25% of females remain NEET compared to 12% males. Within the age group, 21% of those aged 17 to 24 versus 12% of those aged 25 to 29. Training modalities, 24% of CT and work-based learning participants versus 12% from owned institutions. Area of residence, 21% remain NEET from the rural areas and 14% in urban areas. So these patterns indicate that younger trainees, females, rural participants, and those in community-based or work-based modalities were likely to remain unattached after leaving the program. With that in mind, I know we can now draw a conclusion. The study shows that program termination among NEET youth during the financial year 2023-2024 was not primarily a result of institutional service delivery, but rather a reflection of deeper ecological vulnerabilities that affected the trainees' ability to persist. We now offer the following recommendations. Financial strain is a primary predictor of withdrawal and should be treated as preventative support rather than emergency aid. So we are recommending explore partnering with the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC, for reduced fares for available routes, and transportation stipends for areas where JUCT transportation is unavailable. Provide targeted financial assistance for the most vulnerable trainees enrolled in non-stipend-based programs, prioritizing those in emerging skill areas. Provide dedicated residential options by allocating a share of the institutional dorm spaces for vulnerable youth to reduce transport burden and improve learning focus. Introduce starter toolkits for skill areas that require personal tools. For more advanced tools and equipment, a library model is recommended, and this could be implemented at each institution, allowing trainees to borrow and return equipment at the end of the day. Some NEET youth lacked the motivation and emotional support that was necessary to complete the duration of their training program. We are recommending build resilience among NEET youth to help them develop coping skills, problem-solving ability, and confidence to handle setbacks. Provide stress management support activities or guidance that help NEET youth manage pressure in healthy ways. Strengthen advisement and counseling to ensure NEET youth have access to someone they can speak to when challenges arise. Provide capacity building for instructors in recognizing signs of distress to support early intervention and referral of trainees to appropriate support channels. Improved access planning and communication. Maintain consistent assessment calendars, communicate changes in advance, and use reminders so that trainees can plan work, childcare, and transport without compromising training standard. Maintain active communication with trainees, especially those showing signs of disengagement. Establish early warning support systems. Institutions should adopt structured monitoring systems that detect disengagement before it becomes withdrawal by using attendance patterns, participation levels, and academic performance to identify early signs of terminations. Implement targeted quality review and standardization initiative. And quality reviews should be undertaken in training locations to examine the factors contributing to dissatisfaction with instructional effectiveness. This is to ensure that instructional effectiveness remain consistently high across geographic locations. By proactively addressing localized dissatisfaction before it escalates, institutions can strengthen overall service quality, reinforce trainee confidence, and reduce the risk of attrition. In closing, this study demonstrates that termination among NEET youth is not primarily a service delivery failure. Institutional quality matters, yes, but it is not the dominant determinant of termination. In this case, the primary drivers are rooted in trainees' lived realities. If retention strategies align with the actual drivers of termination, TVET can fulfill its intended role, not only as a training pathway, but as a stabilizing bridge to employment and inclusion. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Sang Downer. And I see your very big cheerleader, Mrs. Alison Birch Cooper, your supervisor, seemed to be very pleased with that presentation. And she's exceptionally pleased. She has confirmed, colleagues. And that is the kind of support that we also want from our supervisors. So thank you for that, Alison. And thank you, Caroline, for sharing such insights with us. And I was particularly pleased to learn from your presentation that the training environment that we provide for these persons from the NEET group was not a significant factor in their decision to terminate training, but rather it was more around financial pressure, which was represented by 31%, transportation affordability, 26%, and 24% lack of motivation. So this encourages us, colleagues, to find the strategies that can resolve these issues. And the research presented also gave very useful recommendations. The transportation aid that we can provide, I found particularly interesting, especially given that we currently have a memorandum of understanding with the JUTC. So I think that provides a platform for us to explore that particular recommendation and see where we can take it. And she also spoke about building resilience amongst these young people. And I am confident that our instructor corps has the capacity to do that. And where there are any gaps, I'm equally confident that the training will be provided so that we can actually action that. So thank you so much, Mrs. Sang Downer. And we're going to move quickly, colleagues, to our third presentation. This one will be delivered by Dr. Steve Lawrence, who is Director Principal for the Southwest TVET Institute. Dr. Lawrence is a transformational educational leader, researcher, and technology strategist with over 3 decades of experience spanning technical vocational education and training, government, academia, and private enterprise. His work bridges research, education, and industry practice. With a background in computer science, curriculum leadership, and organizational transformation, he specializes in technology-enabled learning, workforce transformation, and institutional capacity building. His leadership advances competency-based education and training, digital TVET ecosystems, and applied research that strengthens alignment between training systems and emerging labor market demands. He's a published researcher and national thought leader. His current research explores the integration of artificial intelligence, data analytics, and digital systems in education and workforce development to improve training delivery, decision making, and productivity outcomes. So I think it is quite appropriate, ladies and gentlemen, for us to welcome Dr. Lawrence at this time to present on the topic, Artificially Intelligent Education Disrupted.
All right, good morning, colleagues, present and online. Today, we continue the journey of what's happening in TVET and our role in it. Research is an essential part of whatever we do. As a matter of fact, research should augment every decision that is made, because when you think about it, data, when put in formation, should inform all actions. Today we'll be looking at artificially intelligent education disruptive. And we'll be going through 2 epochs. We'll look at what happened when we emergently had to shift online, forced technology use, and then how it set up a primer for us to be more ready for the advancement of disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence. Now, typically, when we hear of artificial intelligence in the media for the last 2 or 3 decades, this is what would be depicted. It would be something that was a pie in the sky, it was out of touch, it was happening somewhere else. Something happened in the last couple of years where instead of it being out there on TV, it became nested in our homes, whether as Siri, as Alexa, or whatever your flavor of the week is. My abstract pretty much sets the foundation for what we looked at, where we looked at TVET, STEM, STEAM, and STREAM ecosystems. We looked at all the body of research that was current and available from the highest impact journals. And we examined how AI is transforming not only curriculum design, assessment practices, because if you touch curriculum, if you touch instruction, you have to also adjust what assessment looks like, and what that translates to as it relates to workforce alignment and the overall learner experience. Because at the end of the day, we are treating with participants of learning, clients of learning. Our product is learning. And also, one of the biggest things that came out of the study was the fact that we are standing at a place where we're not just talking about the shift from Industry 4.0 to 5.0, but actually in history, we're now seeing the moving away from direct instruction, which has been the primary way of teaching and learning for the last thousands of years, to now where facilitators are becoming the learning architects. They are the facilitators of critical thinking. We're going to also be exploring critical trends, current trends, ethical considerations, and strategic implementations and implications. And one of the things that will support us will actually be the performance framework, which came out of a study looking at virtual learning a few years ago. Now, the three problems that we examined: artificial intelligence, the forced digital adoption. We looked at AI from an educational reinvention perspective, and we also examined AI from a faculty readiness and how that determines success. Now, we went through about 55 different articles across disciplines in the literature that was examined. The top 8 pieces spanned robotics, stem cell studies. We looked at a systematic review of robotics and robots across interactive learning environments. One of the things that was very interesting was the fact that the Baker article from 2019, which looked at rebooting the future of education based on artificial intelligence, ended up becoming almost the playbook of what happened over the last 5 years. Deng, in 2025, that's last year, also did an examination of how does ChatGPT and other AI instruments and tools, how does that affect student learning? And it couldn't be more prophetic, because I published a piece in 2023, 2024 that looked at virtual education and virtual learning as it relates to faculty perceptions and perspectives and how that impacted their success and the learning outcomes. And I came up with a performance framework to help with the implementation and the pivot that needed to take place. And one of the legs that the performance framework stands on is normalizing artificial intelligence integration, which was dubbed Taking Aim. So you can imagine how excited I am, because this year would have been 30, I'm not dating myself, but in excess of 30 years being involved in technology integration in education. And one of the interesting things, the TAM model, the technology acceptance model, is one of the oldest models used across all ecosystems dealing with technology. And what it looks at is, what are the things that allow you to implement technology as best as possible or successfully? And if you look at it, it literally echoes what has transpired over the last couple of years with the disruptive technology and the onset of artificial intelligence. So the first epoch, the first disruption. A couple of years ago, I landed from a funeral in Florida, dropped into Bermuda, and within 2 hours of being on the ground in Bermuda, the entire country was shut down. That was the beginning of the first disruption. At that time, I had the esteemed privilege of guiding virtual learning environments for about 3 institutions. And I can tell you that every single one of them was different in terms of what school continuity looked like. For boards that were agile and that were open to what data says, what research says, and open to being guided and taking the risk, they were able to pivot in a few hours. I can tell you there's one institution that 3 years into COVID-19, they still didn't get it. They still weren't there. They didn't have the resources, because understand that when you're dealing with that kind of disruption, you can't be ready unless you were ready before. You don't get ready after the fact. You have to have looked around the corner and anticipated what might come. And that is what we're calling on us to do. And AI gives us a level playing field, because before now you needed a big research team with a ton of resources to do anything impactful. But now we can whip up an agent pretty much in any discipline and get the kind of outcomes and impact that we'd like to have. What came out of that first disruption? A strengthening of virtual learning communities. I remember in 2000, 2001, I was at the VTD at the time, and serving as the lead for distance learning, online learning, virtual learning. It was such a hard sell. Nobody really understood that it had value. It should be invested in. It was hard to sell at all levels. But Dr. Amonde and I served on the same team at that time, and the institution took a chance. And I'm happy to report that that virtual learning ecosystem is still alive and well. And that is what we're called to do. We're called to lead in a way that drives. The availability equity. Once it's online, it can be made available to anybody with access. And that was a very good thing that came from the first disruption. On-demand support, because it was virtual, support was federated, so you got support once you had access, and that is always good. And the global reach cannot be overstated, because essentially what it meant is that once you can virtualize it and you can get it out there, people have access. And this is critical for TVET, because TVET is usually assumed to be, you need the labs, you need all the infrastructure in place. But we're getting to a place where it's a balancing act, because you climb onto a plane not recognizing that in majority, a lot of the flying that your pilots have done prior to coming to you was done using simulations. And that is something we have to clock as we plan for the future of what TVET looks like within our institutions and across the agency. Disruption number 2, this is where we're at. We are at the genesis, we are present in Genesis 1 of what AI is rebuilding. And we actually get to speak into what becomes the future. If we're saying we're leading TVET, it also means we should be leading as it relates to what does TVET become augmented by AI. We should be taking aim at driving policy, the guidelines, all the governance surrounding artificial intelligence integration into the educative ecosystem comes from us, or at least we should be at the table driving this. Now, I have good news. The National TVET Research Committee is staffed by many members of the trust. That means that apart from UTEC and UAA and all the statting and all these other stakeholders, we have a seat where we get to actually drive what governance looks like, what the research repository looks like, what the compendium of studies end up becoming. So no longer will you, in a few years, search for TVET research and get a few hundred while everybody else is millions and thousands across STEM, STEAM, and STREAM. We're getting to a point, as Dr. Walder would say, where we're TVETizing research. And this has to become a very deliberate focus. Now, what has come from this disruption? Adoption of AI tools in the classrooms. A lot of teachers are using it to plan. A lot of students are using it to augment their learning. It's also good at creative adaptive learning. A few years ago, I served on a First Nation reservation in Upper Canada, and one of the best things that happened there for me was, even though I was there as a technical consultant, I ended up getting involved in how students learned within the ecosystem. Now, what was different was, even though French and English were the actual languages of Canada, for these very sovereign nations, they had their own dialects. In the same way we have our patois, our local Creole, our local parlance, they spoke Saïsi Dene. And one of the biggest challenges was getting somebody to fly on 2 or 3 or 4 planes to get to work, and then it falls to -50. Because that was the only time we did not go to work. If it's -50 or below, you do not go to work. If it's above -50, it's considered warm enough to go to work. No, they had a literacy challenge, but we could not get the talent to come and stay. And I sat with my, at the time, director, and we had a discussion, and we started to use artificial intelligence augmented literacy software. And what it did, it benchmarked every person. They entered, there were no lies told. Everybody knew where they were. But everything was then prescriptively personalized and adapted by the AI infusion so that over time, what they got was what they were weakest at. And that strengthened the growth, and leaps and bounds. In a few months, we had readers in French and English. That is the kind of strength that artificial intelligence brings when you allow it to take aim. Automation of administrative tasks. Just the curriculum alignment alone, Dr. Amonde will tell you it is a job unto itself. Whether it's reframing or recasting or reforming a curriculum product, it takes work. But using technology, using disruptive technology, using AI, we're able to make some really big advances. One of the biggest tickets coming out of AI in the ecosystem is the student performance analysis. We can catch failure much earlier. We can catch the gaps really early, and we can treat it more prescriptively. And that is important, because as good as you are as a teacher, as a facilitator, as an instructor, you aren't able to give everybody the kind of attention that will allow you to dial in and personalize instruction. But this technology allows you to be driven by that. So the old model, direct instruction, teacher, sage on stage, instructor on stage, content, student. You must learn. I tell you, you learn. That is no longer the case. Based on what is happening with AI now, what we have is now teachers now becoming learning architects, using AI to strengthen the product that they offer. And then they get to use how they frame instruction and content and assessment so that AI is used by the student as a cognitive amplifier. This is dangerous, because if they're very creative, they will produce exponentially. But what it also means, we have to dial in on those that are not keeping pace, because it will also increase the disparity. The performance framework is a simple framework, and essentially what it did in virtual learning for me, it is also doing for augmented technology and artificial intelligence use in the ecosystem. Providing comprehensive training and support, enhancing technological infrastructure, those are the things that will make it actually work. Revitalizing research and evaluation processes. Fostering a culture of continuous improvement. Orchestrating student engagement workflows. Recognizing and incentivizing programs for technology integration. So if instructors, if faculty are using the technology, there has to be some way of saying, good job, keep it up, and even support for it if they want to be early adopters. Some people will be laggards. Some people will not jump on immediately. But for the early adopter, there has to be something that make them exemplars, master teachers, master trainers, and it should be supported. We also need to ensure that our policies and guidelines are maintained in keeping. So right now, most policies across educative ecosystems do not allow for artificial intelligence to be the true enabler. In many universities, it is villainized. In some, it is embraced. And we have to have some kind of discourse and consensus about what will that be for us. We have to adopt agile and adaptive systems. And the big ticket for me was the N, normalizing artificial intelligence integration. Now, when I penned this about 5 years ago, I had no idea that would be the strongest leg we are now standing on. And we have to normalize it. We have to make it a part of what we do. And it should be okay, because it allows us to be way more productive. We have to talk about this collaborative knowledge sharing, and that's what is happening here. We're having the discussions, we're having workshops. HR is doing a bunch of other series surrounding having the conversation about what makes us better. We have to also engender equity and inclusivity. We just heard from the earlier researcher that some people aren't doing as well as they could because they aren't experiencing the framework and the ecosystem the way we have it planned. That's something to listen to. Every criticism is a thank you from us as researchers because it's free data. If you get criticism, even if it is 1% true, you just got 1% more data than you had before. And that is a gift. If you're a researcher and you have had to knock on doors to get approval and get, you appreciate free data. So when I get criticism, I'm so happy. I'm like, thank you. Thank you, because this allows us to not create pretty reports and pretend that everything is fine and dandy, but we actually get to prescriptively zoom in on what really needs work. And the final thing, well, equity and inclusivity. Ensure that everybody is catered for, and technology does a great job of that. As we wind up, some of the things that came from the study, especially when we looked at what did the facilitators want to experience and even what the learners thought would make a big difference. But this is especially from the angle of the facilitators. AI literacy training, prompt engineering, vibe prompting. They wanted support from that, from an organizational. Everybody's out there doing their little thing, but it really needs to be a very structured, cohesive, planned effort. AI, pedagogical, and andragogical certification, funded pathways. Everybody's paying for their little subscription, but we really need to, it is such an enabler that we really need to fund it and make it standardized. Funded research ecosystem. I know Dr. Amande would love to have 6 months away just to sit and sip her tea, a cup of tea, and in her very finest cockney, and just enjoy the data and analyzing it and doing some comparative studies and even being a part of longitudinal studies across other ecosystems. So we have to normalize research sabbaticals, paid fellowships, grants should not just be for trainees. We should have some studies internally that people want to do, want to go and try something, and we create a test bed for them to be safe in research. One of the biggest lessons that came from this was the truth that AI transformation is a human readiness problem. It's not about just infrastructure and having the tools. Some people are just not ready for this, and we have to dial in with how we manage our change management. And the biggest kicker, the one that underpins it all, is we have to ensure that we have the governance policy framework in place. We have to be mindful of data protection. How is your data being handled back when it's fed? What is sensitive within the organization? What can be fed? How should it be de-identified? That has to be standardized and taught. And accreditation modernization. Right now, the bodies that we are aligned to for accreditation have not taken the plunge. And that is something we have to drive. We have to bring them to the table and say, we as the TVET leaders are going here, and we'd love for you to come along for the ride. And you have to give that option, because guess what? The beautiful thing about online is it creates other options. But while we want to stay with homegrown, if it doesn't meet our needs in the way that we need, warning shot, NCTVET, UCJ, and others, get with it, because we need the support from our accrediting ecosystem. We are now having, from a curriculum perspective, a shift in how content is organized for teaching and learning. So it's no longer about memorization. It's now about problem solving, augmented by the actual tools. It's about system thinking and competency-based transformation. That's how the assignments should be outlaid. It shouldn't be quizzes and a little this and a little check this box. The guesswork, that era has ended. We actually need to be using this as a cognitive amplifier to create new things that have not existed before. The scientific community have been leaps and bounds, new vaccines, new treatment plans, because they are using it maximally. But we seem timid and shy to look at this gift as something that has leveled the playing field. We have to make sure that we zoom in on the fact that this gives us strength. This gives us an advantage that never existed before. But it's not all roses. We actually have some considerations. Ensuring fairness and transparency in algorithms. How was your data system trained? How was it trained? If you're using an external subscription, you have to be figuring out where did they cream their information from, and you might find intrinsic biases. You're finding you're finding less challenge with racism and those kind of biases now. Now it's more about you ask it to write a lesson plan, and it's a nutrition lesson plan, and it's talking about pears, which are not avocados, apricots and prunes and peaches, and a Jamaican student is looking for their mangoes and will need to see their mangoes for them to make because their phonemic awareness does not necessarily encompass apricots. It does, however, have mangoes, all flavors of it in it. We have to also figure out what happens with the student-teacher dynamic. There's something about a teacher looking into the eyes of a student and seeing that I have to pivot. I lost this one. I'm going to adjust. You have strong data analytics support from AI, but you also need to organize the ecosystem that you're also present to now catch the things that can't be caught outside the human touch. We have to stay sharp as it relates to data privacy, because security concerns are real. Our freshly minted cyber expert, Dr. Monday, will tell you a lot of the things that are updated and uploaded should never have been shared. But now we get a chance to formalize what the training and the preparedness of our teams look like. Algorithmic leadership. This is the answer that started out in the first disruption, where we moved to digitized education. The second one that we're still standing in, that is transitioning us from Industry 4.0 to Industry 5.0, where it defines intelligence in education. It redefines it. It's a different thing now than what it meant 5 years ago to use technology in education. It was just about PowerPoint. A decade ago, you'd be happy to have a PowerPoint and a smart board. Now it's about how can you use an agent to scaffold what you do within the classroom. And performance as a framework enables future-ready TVET. So, as I close, taking aim with the performance framework, we looked at AI-enabled CBET and TVET, predictive trainee success models, AI-supported assessment, and workforce analytics alignment. Because the truth is, you can't just be looking at labor market. Labor market is looking in the rearview mirror. You also have to look at your enrollment trends. How many people, what are the searches looking like for our other programs that are not coming up on the labor market report? We have to start balancing that, and aligning that will allow us to make the right kind of projections and allocation of resources. Really and truly, at the end of the day, what the Delphi study came back with was that empowering educators with AI tools allowed for content creation to be more robust. It allowed for tutoring assistant to be more responsive. It allowed for smarter data analysis, and it allowed for automation of administrative tasks. In closing, performance is not just about showing up. It's about being deliberate about how we strategize what the future becomes in TVET education and in TVET research. I invite you to take the plunge. If you're not yet on board, jump on board, grab it with both hands. We're going somewhere together. Let's TVETize the future with research. Do I take this? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence, for another quite engaging and insightful presentation. And I liked how you were able to take us through the performance framework around the integration of artificial intelligence and how we can normalize that in the learning process through things like enhancing technological integration, providing comprehensive training and support, and fostering a culture of continuous improvement. And I'm hoping that there are going to be some very interesting questions on this particular topic, because I have a bias for this topic, being a mommy to a son who's studying artificial intelligence. So I have a very keen interest in this one in particular. And I'm hoping we'll get a chance to explore that a little more. But for now, we are going to move to our final presenter for this morning, Dr. Monica Porter-Lewis, Senior Manager for Learning Resources Development. She has over 30 years of experience in education and has led the design and development of numerous competency-based education and training curricula and instructional materials across the technical vocational education and training system. Her work spans multiple occupational areas and has significantly contributed to strengthening standard-based training and assessment in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. She holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Career and Technical Education. She has presented scholarly papers at local and regional conferences and delivered training in TVET curriculum design and instructional resource development to local, regional, and international audiences, including education officers, curriculum specialists, and industry professionals. Please join me in welcoming to the lectern Dr. Monica Porter-Lewis, presenting on the topic, Evaluation of a Competency-Based Education and Training Program.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to those who are listening online. Mine is a pleasure this morning to share with you an evaluation of a TVET program done right here in the Heart Trust. And the sample was among 4 institutions within Heart. The theme of this research and development sensitization session, Evidence, Innovation, and Impact, Shaping the Future of TVET in Jamaica, speaks directly to the urgency of this moment in our national development. As Jamaica strengthens its human capital base, TVET must not only expand access, but also demonstrate quality, relevance, and measurable outcomes. Within the Heart and STA Trust system, TVET is designed to produce industry-ready graduates. But an important question remains. How do we know that our programs are truly delivering on that promise? All right. So I will have to share without you seeing the presentation, which I really wanted you to see. So today's presentation shares findings from the CommiChef Level 2 program, one of the most demanded training areas within the tourism and hospitality sector. The program is designed to train chefs who will be NVQJ certified for the tourism sector. Some stakeholders had concerns about some of the newer units added to the qualification plan, the competence of the facilitators to teach these units, and the lack of adequate resources. Furthermore, the program has not been formally assessed with a view to addressing these concerns. Hence, the need for a formal evaluation. So that was why I chose to do this program. The data used was before the administrative merger of the Heart Trust with the JFLL, the NYS, and the Apprenticeship Board. Using a rigorous mixed methods approach and the SIP evaluation model, which is context, input, process, product. This study moves beyond assumptions to provide structured empirical evidence about the program. So under the context phase, the context phase evaluates the program in terms of its objectives and the learning outcomes based on the needs of the interest groups. The input phase assessed human and physical resources, teaching and learning resources, and funding. The process phase focused on the program delivery, and the product phase examined the program performance, the impression of the stakeholders about the program, and the mastery of knowledge and skills. Who are the stakeholders of the program? The trainees, the graduates, the facilitators, the administrators, and employers. 9 research questions guided the study, but for this presentation, I pulled only 6. 2 from the input phase, 3 from process, and 1 from product. 4 training sites were evaluated. I used pseudonyms for the training sites. So I chose 4 training sites that have been delivering the CommiChef program for over 20 years. And they are BH, BC, BT, and BB. These are pseudonyms. I chose 150 trainees in total, 12 facilitators, 7 administrators, 150 graduates, 45 employers, giving me a sample size of 364. For the phase 1, which I did the qualitative phase first, so purposeful sampling was used to select the 7 administrators because they had good knowledge of the program. For the quantitative phase, I used all 150 trainees. I targeted 150 graduates, all 12 facilitators, and 45 employers. The response rate of the participants was 245. So for the quantitative phase, I had 58%, qualitative phase 71, and the overall response was 67%, which according to Bobby is considered good. The findings. The participants were predominantly females. I had 111 respondents from the females, although I targeted 150. The graduates, I only got 83 of 150 because the number of graduates who responded did not represent this key stakeholders group due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 100 response from the facilitators and 5 of the 7 administrators responded. The age range of the participants, the age range of the respondents, 57.6% of the respondents were between 25 years and below. Noticeably, these were trainees and graduates. Majority of the facilitators and administrators were over 36 years old. As it relates to qualification and residence, 54.6% of the trainees and graduates indicated they had CSEC passes, which is one of the requirements to enter the program. The majority of trainees, they resided in the county of Surrey because this is as a result of 2 of the sites located within this county. As it relates to the facilitators' qualification and experience, 40% had bachelor's, 20% had master's, and 40% had other qualification. And these other qualifications are diplomas and associate degrees. So they all met the requirements for the trust. Of the 12 facilitators, 5 had between 10 to 19 years of teaching experience within the Heart Trust. The employers who participated, 34 employers participated, and they were from hotels, restaurants, resorts, other establishments such as guest houses, canteen, and fast food establishments. Majority of them establishments were located in Kingston. Some of the employers had employed fewer than 10 graduates, others fewer than 20, and others fewer than 41 graduates. Thanks very much. So, to the findings. Input. Research question 1. Because remember, input look at the funding and the human resources. For the input evaluation, 4 themes emerged for research question 1. The first one is the adequacy of funding and facilitators. So there's adequate funding for the delivery of the program and adequate number of facilitators to deliver the program. The other theme that came out was that the facilitators, they had the necessary qualifications for teaching the program. Then the other 2 themes spoke about inadequate teaching and learning resources. They mentioned that, so we'll move on. So we're looking at inadequate teaching and learning resources. So you hear the voices. So you hear the voices of the administrators coming out. They mentioned that they have poor internet service. And they stated that the organization must not be blamed because it is the provider of the service that is to be blamed. Then the whole matter of trainee materials were not available for use by some trainees. The trainees must buy some of their training materials. For example, perishable items for practical classes, which some of them cannot afford. And they did mention too that there's a mentality of some of the trainees to waste materials when they are provided by the organization, hence unavailability of training materials for some classes. Then the whole matter of procurement process, which is very bureaucratic, layered with strict timelines. Because of lack of planning on the part of some administrators for procuring goods and services in a timely manner. So as a result, millions of dollars would go back into the trust fund every year. For the next theme, as it relates to the inadequate teaching and learning facilities, I also did what you call document review. So there were various documents that were reviewed, documents such as inventories, accreditation reports, audit reports, TDAP, lesson plans, and a number of things came to the fore, also with the visit that I made. 3 of the institutions needed new labs. One of the institutions needed an additional class because there's inadequate storage space. No, when I said in additional classroom, there was one class that was being held under the tree, under a big tree there. So additional classroom is needed. There's also, the administrator stated that enrollment and certification targets were high, and each year the target increases. So there's also a high demand for the program. As a result, one of the institutions had classes 7 days of the week. Then you have the out-of-service equipment. The trust has a disposal of assets policy. But in order to action this, a representative from the Ministry of Finance must be at the institution to carry out this exercise. So, as it is said by one of the administrators, that neither HART nor the MOF sees this as priority, hence all of these things are there. And so you have storage problem and space problem. And the summary is that government assets are really hard to dispose of. The next theme for research 2 speaks to the curriculum contents and if it aligns with the NVQ. 2 themes emerge, and the administrators agree that the curriculum developed from the NVQ standards, there is alignment. Also, training is focused on industry and employability needs. For research question 3, 2 themes emerged. Teacher competence, passion, motivation, and creativity. And you hear the voices coming out here that there shouldn't be no difference in the learning outcome of the delivery of the program, but some facilitators, they're more creative than others. And some facilitators, they have more motivation and creativity in the whole delivery of the program. And then we have teacher pedagogy. And stated that where facilitators were trained and their experience, it impacted delivery. She cited an example that if our facilitators were trained at UTech and UE in engineering, the UE facilitators are more theoretical in their delivery, while the UTech facilitators are more technical. Some instructors, she mentioned, they come with a wealth of industry knowledge, but they lack the pedagogical skills. And then you have facilitators who are trained at the teachers' colleges. They come with the pedagogical skills, but they lack the technical skills. And TVET is really 70% practical and 30% theory. For the process evaluation, for research question 4, what concerns do facilitators and administrators have about using the qualification plan for the program? 3 themes came out. Perspectives of the curriculum here. Bob mentioned that they love the curriculum because it makes life easier for them. Dee stated that not every facilitator can translate the competency standards into a curriculum. One of the administrators is of the view that the curriculum does not have enough content. And so she stated that although we practice TVET, time is a challenge. It is not infinite. So the more content you put in the curriculum, what you're doing is really freeing up the facilitators. And she spoke about the increased enrollment and certification targets. Then another stated that the content is outdated. The standards are revised between 5 to 10 years, and that's a wide gap. As a result, you have the outdatedness. But then Bob says that you can't really fault the facilitators nor the developers of the competency standards because of the rapid changes that are taking place within the industry. Research question 5. Look at the extent to which there are differences in the perceptions of the trainees and graduates regarding the program. So 2 themes came out for this. Perception and delivery. One of the administrators said that the trainees complained that there's not sufficient practical classes. And some of the trainees complained that they have this dissatisfaction with the absence of the integration of technology to support delivery. They're also dissatisfied with how the employability skills units are taught. And some of the facilitators still have the chalk and talk mentality. Another challenge I face is with the mixability of trainees. It is challenging for facilitators and trainees. So they mentioned that for some trainees, you might be going too fast as a facilitator. For others, it may be too slow. For some would come into the program who can barely pass the grade 9 diagnostic test. And then there are those who are coming even from with academic qualifications. In addition, many of the trainees are interested in cooking and not in the employability skills units. As a result, what they do to combat this is to teach the units, the employability skills units, first. Because if the technical units are taught first, the trainees will leave the program, hence the organization not meeting the certification target. Some trainees come into the program only for the technical skills. They are not interested in being employed, therefore they don't see the need for the employability skills. Some of the trainees were dissatisfied based on how the employability skills units were being taught. And the mixability, as Eve mentioned, that you have more academic qualification because you have students, for example, having masters and first degree coming from UTech, and they come into the program to master the technical skills. So where you have that dichotomy now, that mixability, trainees, some of the trainees and facilitators are having a challenge. For the final research question on the product, we looked at the differences in the overall perception and satisfaction of the program by the trainees, graduate facilitators, and employers. So over 95% of the graduates are employed before they leave the program. Facilitators and employers complain about the employability skills of trainees and graduates. Some trainees enroll into the program due to overseas job opportunities. And lastly, some employers have favorable view of the graduates because they say that they had excellent technical skills and found the program to be good. The literature review supports the findings of employers. And coming out of the HEART 2021 study, it says that employers prefer to employ graduates who display critical employability skills than technical skills. This was supported by the literature that you recruit for attitude and you train for skills. Two scholars are of the view that employability skills should be explicitly taught, but this is not happening in many institutions. And other scholars are of the view that employability skills should be embedded at all levels of the education system. So the recommendation and satisfaction of stakeholders. Some trainees, graduates, facilitators, and employers agreed that they would recommend the program to others. Some facilitators, graduates, and employers were satisfied with the Commis-Chef Level 2 program. The least satisfied were the trainees. This program has a number of strengths in terms of adequate funding and staff. Staff has the required qualification to teach. The curricula aligns with the NVQ. Facilitators have positive perception of the program. They like the curriculum. And lastly, the excellent technical skills, and the graduates are employable. But the weaknesses outnumber the strengths. Inadequate facilities, tools, equipment. As a result, some institutions operate 7 days for the week, large class sizes, and insufficient facilities, tools, and equipment. Some trainees and facilitators are displeased with the mixability of some trainees in class. Some trainees are disgruntled with how the employability skills units are taught and limited ICT integration in the lessons. Also, there's dissatisfaction with the number of practical sessions allotted. The NVQ challenges facilitators' pedagogical skills, and there's difficulty in using the NVQ for delivery. And lastly, graduates' attitudes are poor as they lack some employability skills. How does this study strengthen evidence in terms of TVET? So the evidence based on the theme, evidence, innovation, and impact. Evidence, rigorous evaluation framework was used. The SIP model was used. I used a mixed method design. There was high reliability coefficient, and there was a triangulation of member check-in. Then we have the evidence of alignment between the curriculum and the standards, the gaps in the employability skills, the resource constraints, and the stakeholders' perception. So the research moves TVET reform from assumptions and anecdotal concerns to validated institutional evidence. The second, a commitment to innovation. 3 multi-level innovations highlighted. The use of mixed methods in the Caribbean. And as Dr. Monde alluded to, and Dr. Lawrence, there was limited literature for program evaluation in TVET. And even when you find an evaluation, they did not use any model to evaluate the program. The curriculum provided strong embedding of employability skills, ICT, etc. And lastly, that of impact. The findings have impact at multiple levels. Institutional impact, and you see how the institutions are come out there. You have workforce impact in terms of improved graduate employability, stronger technical and soft skills balance, and better industry confidence in the NVQ. And lastly, national impact. So the study reinforces the mandate of HeartTrust to produce competent industry-ready graduates. Colleagues, as I bring closure to this presentation, this study does not only evaluate a program, it provides a blueprint for strengthening CBET in Jamaica through evidence-based reform, innovative evaluation approaches, and measurable workforce impact. And so as we examine the findings today, I invite you to consider not only what this evaluation reveals about one program, but what it suggests about the future direction of TVET in Jamaica. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Porter Lewis, for those findings. And even though you would have used pseudonyms for the names of the institutions, the information you have shared still remains quite relevant and useful. And I'm sure we have gleaned some insights that will help to close some of the gaps that you have identified as we continue to ensure that employability skills are explicitly taught right across the board in our institutions, and that the impact of the work that we do at Heart can be felt across the institutions, across our workforce, and nationally as well as we reinforce our mandate. I want to take the opportunity at this time to thank all our presenters who have provided such great insights in research and development and sensitizing us as other team members around the importance of the research in the work that we do to ensure that our strategies align with our mandate and that our mandate is sustained so that we can continue to have national impact. We do have a few questions that would have come in, and we're going to move to that segment now where we entertain the questions to our presenters. I'm going to take them in the order in which they would have delivered their presentations. So I'm going to ask Dr. Amonde to make her way to the lectern to respond to the question, how can the findings from the labor market research and monitoring and evaluation departments be better translated into policy and practice?
Thank you for that question, Mrs. Smiley Green. And for my colleague online, thank you for that question. I think it's very relevant. They have put so much resources, time, effort, rigor in conducting these kinds of research that we really should use them. and they are coming out with some solid findings. We heard the findings about the dropout, and as I sat there listening, Mrs. Sangdon, I said these are areas for improving our trainee support services network. These are the things that we are really concerned about as we try to strengthen trainee support. And I know Dr. McLaughlin, the Deputy Managing Director for NTPD, is very keen on trainee support. So I think it's important for us to find the right avenue for disseminating the findings. So a presentation like that would be good to present to the NTPD leadership core. We can disseminate it in different ways, create infographics, create resources, have webinars, have consultations, and then we could begin to implement it on a small scale. We could do pilots of different things. So how can we collaborate with JUTC to do a pilot as it relates to improvement in transportation? We hear also the research that Dr. Porter Lewis on competency-based education. I think that is very relevant, and we need to present that to our instructors, you know, our principal directors, our training system, because there's a lot there that we could take from to improve. So find the correct research channel, get the support of leadership, because I think that is important. It will have implications for resources, and we could begin to implement it on a small scale. I am not sure at the moment we are monitoring and evaluation towards their report. They spend a lot of time doing some very rigorous studies. We don't want those to be an academic exercise. So it would be good if they have a repository for making these available for more of us to go and look at and to review and to see what we can take from it to improve practice. So make it widely available, find different ways of disseminating the findings, do it on a small scale, implement, follow up, do tracking, and seeing the outcomes before we scale up. But definitely we have to get these out. They are not nice academic papers that should be sitting on shelves. So we need to start somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Monday, for that comprehensive response. We are going to move to our second presenter, Mrs. Sangdowner. And the question is, did the study assess whether early warning indicators could predict termination before participants dropped out?
Thank you for that question. And early warning system was a recommendation made given the findings of the research. However, early warning systems has been implemented in the United States and in some European countries with good results to reduce termination and absenteeism. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Sangdowner. Precise and to the point. And we appreciate that, especially when we look at the time of day now. Thank you so much. Our third presenter, Dr. Lawrence, we actually have two questions for him, and I'm going to invite him now to respond to the questions. What competencies should future TVET instructors develop to lead confidently in an AI-enhanced classroom? And how do we transition educators from content transmitters to learning architects without overwhelming them?
All right. Thank you for those questions. These are important questions. They're excellent questions, actually, and it gets us to where we need to go. I'm able to merge the response because it's really a matter of figuring out what fluency looks like. At the end of the day, if you have fluency in a language, you're able to communicate more effectively in that language. And it really helps if the person you're sharing the channel with is actually also fluent in that language. So as we balance the books of what kind of resources do we put afield, we not only talk about how do we build capacity for trainees in the technology use, but we also spend the same kind of time looking at what do we invest in our professional development. I know our HRMD team is doing an amazing job running a series right now focused on artificial intelligence integration in mediating learning across TVET. So those are the kind of deliberate things, because if you have fluency in the language of AI and other disruptive technology, it becomes a cognitive enabler not only for facilitators but for instructors. Now, if you're comfortable with a language, you will actually use it more. So most of us have no recollection of when we learned patois, but it is one of the most efficient ways of a Jamaican engaging a Jamaican. What we need to do is set up the training pathways within our professional development loops so that we spend time not as quickly as just doing it to meet a scorecard requirement, but actually being deliberate, planning year after year that I am going to keep building out, bringing in new opportunities, new tools, bringing in experts in the fields, and also not being afraid to lean on, deferring to experts within the field. You should be able to defer or yield to experts and be guided, because what you learn through life is that lessons learned are very valuable. You don't have to hit all the branches falling out of the tree. You can actually learn from those who have the competence, have the experience, and if you lean on that and allow those things to be celebrated as a part of the performance framework that was offered, it made it okay to celebrate people who were early adopters and that were using the technology in a way that gave the system more robust response to what the trainees need. So it's really a matter of concretizing the fluency. What is needed on the ground is training opportunities, repeated and scaffolded. I think Vygotsky said it right with zonal proximal development, where you build out based on existing knowledge. So really and truly, there's a lot of talent within the trust, and we might not even need to look outside. We can start looking at who is doing it well, using them as the examples, have a highlight. From a marketing perspective, you highlight these people as the exemplars of this is how you do it well. And if that becomes the culture, when we have the awards functions, if that is also on the lineup, we're awarding our researchers, the people who are exemplars. I remember probably about 15 years ago, I was actually awarded twice by the government of Bermuda because of technology infusion into the curriculum of that educative system. So we can kind of normalize it and make it a part of what we do. And if it becomes fluent, it becomes easier to do. Overwhelming, it's a balancing act. Take your personal days, spend time on the beach, turn the phone off, and then when you come back, understand that what we do matters. We serve the most vulnerable in our society. We are that safety net that really just changes the direction. I had a discussion with Dr. Berry this morning about one of her students who was on the verge of being expelled and came to see her in his nice suit and tie, offering to buy her lunch. That is the kind of transformation we want to report. And by showing up and doing what we do very well, we have that opportunity to prevent burnout, prevent being overwhelmed, but also being rewarded by more than money and incentives. Also what we see happening on the ground when we see lives change. I hope I answered all the questions. Were those my 2 questions? All right, God be praised. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence. I have a question. If you're up to taking another one, I could always pose one that I have a particular interest in. But I'm going to take Dr. Porter Lewis, and then we'll close with my question for you. So Dr. Porter Lewis will also be responding to 2 questions, colleagues. The first one, you described this study as methodological. You described the study as methodological innovation in Jamaican TVET system. How can this evaluation model be replicated across other heart programs? That's one. And two, what policy adjustments would you recommend based on your findings?
Thank you. So the first thing is to develop a heart-wide SIP evaluation template. So this creates a structured but adaptable evaluation blueprint for all occupational areas. Then we develop also what we call an evaluation toolkit, and this would ensure that the methodological consistency while allowing contextual adaptation, because we offer so many programs: construction, hospitality, ICT. Thirdly, we would want to train managers in evaluation literacy. So you move evaluation from being an academic exercise to an operational practice, and we embed evaluation into the quality assurance system. So that is my answer or response to first question. The strengthening, there are some policies, if they're in place, would be like institutional employers advisory committee. I would want to strengthen that. Also to strengthen curriculum review, strengthen program evaluation. Those are some of the policies that I would want to put in place, and if they're in place, I would want to strengthen them based on the findings of this study. Thanks very much.
No, Dr. Lawrence, for my question. Thank you, Dr. Porter Lewis. And the question I have before we close is, what are your recommendations, Dr. Lawrence? What are your recommendations for managing the integration of artificial intelligence in the teaching and learning process in such a way that our learners remain intelligent?
Thank you so much for that question. I'm glad you caught my play on words in the title, because when I touched the artificially intelligent, I was going somewhere, but this was not the forum for it. But there was a segment in the presentation that looked at what are the success factors as it relates to the curriculum. And people tend to get really scared. Only people like Dr. Amanda and Keisha get excited when they hear curriculum. Most people, when they hear curriculum, they kind of cringe. It feels like a dirty word, but it's really just a guide. It's a guide that you will follow as you take the learner through their educative processes within your curriculum product to end up somewhere that they were not before. Now, that is important because it tries to dial in on where they are now. There has to be some kind of diagnostic understanding of where your learners are. And where you land is that sweet spot in terms of standing on what they know, which is the use of language, the vocabulary of the language. In some fields, some disciplines, there's some additional vocabulary that needs to be introduced. And then you now need to take them to somewhere else. Now, what you cannot have anymore is answer A, B, or C, or D to this question. That will not work. As a matter of fact, even with math questions now, they take a picture of it, the math AI gives them the workout, but that's not bad. What you do now, you turn it into an activity where they now need to have 10 different pathways to solving this problem. They need to verify which one is most close to the actual, because remember, when you mark CXC, you're not marking just for the correct answer, you know. You mark for process, you mark for, you know, the sequencing and all of that. So in the same way, you make it a very complex exercise where they are actually interacting with the content even more than if you give them the chapter to read once. You give them the chapter, but you say also, write prompts. Engineers, you teach them prompt engineering. There's this thing called vibe coding. I have a couple of software developers. My first job straight out of UTech in 1996 was as a junior programmer. I used to write reservation systems for hotels. And I knew I could not do it for a living. If that was how I was going to feed my family, everybody would be slim. I would not have this weight problem, right? But I shifted into other things that were more rewarding after, sadly, the bedline is now struggling. But when you look at it, back then, programming in RPG, in COBOL, in Pascal, in C++, it took you actually learning a full-blown language and all the rules of it to get anything done in it. Now, full-blown programmers, front-end, back-end developers are using vibe coding where AI writes the code and they clean it up and kind of fit it where it needs to go. Now, if people who are classically trained in the discipline are using it in that way as a cognitive amplifier, why are we here telling our learners, don't touch the tool? And I can almost tell you that none of us are going back to using, with all of the zinc that fly off in Sensitization and Westmoreland, I am yet to see anybody using a big stone for drive a nail. Everybody have, even one like a Chinese hammer them. Right? So why are we saying use a tool as a saw, use a tool of a hammer, use a tool of your car to travel from, I drive from Beverly Hills to Black River, Newport, Junction to my locations every day. I have very good tools of my legs, but the better tool to get there is the little car, right? So why are we now, when we finally have something that levels the playground? Because what it means, a student at Harvard does not have an advantage over a student in Tivoli. Nobody, once you give access, what you need to teach them is ethical use, how to use it, proper prompt engineering, and set up guidelines and coach it. Not everybody going to get it right first, A couple of people going to knock out some assignments and send it in, and I'll forget to change the font and all them something. I've had I teach a course in logistics and supply management for CMU, and I remember I saw this paper and I shaped my head. I was like, oh Jesus, I'm going to have this conversation. And this person was a senior manager. I can't, but senior person within an entity. And then when I look back at it, I realized, I made a mistake. I did not properly set my rubric up. My rubric was the old rubric I had from the last time I taught the course. I now needed to update it to say, if you're going to be using an engine, this is what you're allowed to do. Use it to refine your studies, find the latest research in the field, but then now your annotated bibliography that you need to give me, you are going to do that as an oral defense. So I now turn it into a mini dissertation delivery instead of no AI can set you up for orally defend something until you are confident and fluent in it. So really and truly, what it really forces us to do is kind of rework, reimagine. So some of that old thing, yes, I know teachers who have the same lesson plan for 20 years. That has utter wickedness. With all what changing in the world, all maths change. Right? By the time you get to core math, you read one sentence, by now you should know that 2 plus 2 does not always equal to 4. And when you reach it, so it shatters all things we know about life. Not true? So we have to really just be very adaptive, very fluid. And that is one of a study I conducted in 2023. It was interesting when it looked at faculty participation in online tool use and also virtual learning. One of the factors that I expected to come out was gender. When you looked at the percentile, there was no real difference. It was significantly, statistically, it was not significant, a gender difference. What was the greatest predictor of successful faculty adoption of technology was actually how they use technology in their leisure time. Which was interesting because without the data, you're not going to be clocking that. You'll be thinking, oh, because they have 5 degrees, or because they have level 5 and level 6 in this and that. It had nothing to, those things were not showing up as strong or significant. What the data said was how the person used technology in their other aspects of their life actually predicted how much they actually used it when they facilitated learning. So, in answering your question, finally, the truth is we're at a place where AI is going to even recraft what we know learning to be. One of the things that came out of a presentation I did last week was when you looked at the data, we're going to lose about, projected over the next 5 years, about 90 odd million job roles going to disappear or change significantly. But the replacement rate is about 1.8, which is almost 2, meaning that we're going to get about double that new jobs where we not even have the name for it. No JD, no McFeet, all of them something there. So that is exciting. What it means is that we all actually need to retool, but we also have the ability now to, I'm going to be short. I'm getting the looks now. All right, I'll preach another time, but brothers and sisters, thank you for showing up today. I want to just go and be amazing, everyone. This was a good day. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence. And I think we can all say amen. It has indeed been a wonderful session where I hope we would have gleaned very useful information that we can use to advance the work of the trust. And I want to just take us through one takeaway from each presenter in closing. Without research, we react. With research, we anticipate. Provide transportation aid and build greater resilience in our trainees. Normalize artificial intelligence integration, and employability skills should be explicitly taught. So those are my 4 takeaways. I hope you too have your takeaways. And I see some reinforcements and some support coming through in the chat as well. Person says the research has helped to understand the NEET group even more. Somebody spoke about the implications for the TVET curriculum and instructor training and upgrading. There was feedback like excellent presentations. And I'm going to close with the feedback from one colleague who said, this is a wonderful day for research in our system and country. All presentations were well done and will affect change in a positive way. I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time and for your attention. I especially want to thank our presenters who would have done the preparatory work and would have come and delivered in such a commanding way. And for the supervisors who allowed them to do what they did today, some of whom are in the room supporting. I see Alison and I see Keisha. Thank you for being with us. And I'm sure the other supervisors, I'm sure Frederica and Dr. Mack are cheering on the other 2 of you in the virtual space. I'm very confident of that. So thank you so much. And of course, I'm going to ensure that we give you a little token of our appreciation, our presenters. So I'm going to invite Mr. Philando Neal, our manager for corporate and media affairs, just to show you a little of our love, because we are so appreciative of what you have done today for us and for the trust. And we know that we cannot compensate you truly for what you did, but we hope that this little show of appreciation will be greatly accepted. Philando.
So, of course, as Mrs. Green stated, at this time, I'd like to invite our presenters to come front and center to receive your tokens, you know, just to show our appreciation for the excellent presentation that was quite timely and informative. So at this time, Dr. Marcia Rowe Amande. We'll now invite Mrs. Carling Sang-Downer. Dr. Porter Lewis. And finally, Dr. Lawrence. And finally, to grace us, Dr. Berry, for bringing the opening remarks, and welcome. Thank you so much, colleagues. Over to you, Mrs. Green.
Thank you so much, Philando. And with that, we close the research sensitization session that was brought to you by the Marketing, Communications, and Community Engagement Division. Thank you so much for your time and attention.